In a small, quiet town surrounded by thick forests and rolling hills, life had always been peaceful. People knew each other, children played freely in the streets, and neighbors could leave their doors unlocked without worry. It was the kind of town where nothing unusual ever happened, or at least that's what everyone believed. That calm was shattered one sunny afternoon when the unimaginable occurred. 3 children disappeared without a trace. The first to notice was a mother, Mrs. Harper, who had been watching her 2 youngest children play in the yard. She had called out to them, expecting them to respond, but there was only silence. At first, she thought they were hiding or had run off to a friend's house. Panic quickly replaced hope as she searched the yard, the nearby fields, and even the small creek that ran along the edge of the town. But the children were gone. Word of the disappearance spread fast. Neighbors came out to help search, and soon a crowd had formed. Each person calling the children's names, hoping to hear a familiar voice. The town's police department, small and often overwhelmed by even minor disturbances, immediately organized a search. Officers split into teams, combing the forests, empty barns, and abandoned sheds. They even checked the surrounding roads, but there was no sign of the children. The parents, desperate and terrified, refused to wait quietly. They joined the search, calling friends and family, hoping someone had seen something that could explain the sudden vanishing. Fear began to grow in the community. What could have taken the children? Was it a criminal, a runaway incident, or something far stranger? Among the people following the news closely was Dr. Mara Ellison. She wasn't from the town, but she had been monitoring unusual energy patterns in the sky in that region for months as part of her work in astrophysics. Most people ignored the strange lights she occasionally observed late at night, but she couldn't. The patterns were not normal flashes and movements in the atmosphere that didn't match any natural or human-made phenomenon. When she heard about the missing children, a chill ran down her spine. She realized there could be a connection between the energy readings she had been tracking and the sudden disappearance. Driven by a mixture of professional curiosity and concern for the children, she packed her equipment and headed toward the town, knowing she might be the only one who could understand what had truly happened. As the search continued, some townspeople claimed they had seen glowing lights in the forest the night before. Others whispered about strange sounds, like soft humming or high-pitched buzzing coming from the sky. A few were convinced it was a government experiment gone wrong. Even though there was no evidence, the fear of the unknown began to take hold. Parents kept their children close, and the usual laughter in the streets disappeared. Every shadow, every flicker of light made people jump. Sleep became impossible for many, and the atmosphere of the town shifted from casual familiarity to anxious uncertainty. Meanwhile, children themselves were nowhere to be found. Their disappearance had happened too quickly for anyone to notice what had really occurred. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The parents' grief and fear were raw, and the community tried to come together to console them, but the unanswered questions made the pain even heavier. Every adult in town replayed the day over and over in their minds, trying to remember if they had missed something, some sign, some clue, but nothing explained it. The town that had felt so safe now seemed fragile and vulnerable, and everyone realized that life had changed in an instant. Dr. Ellison arrived. Just as the town's frustration was beginning to boil over, she spoke calmly to the authorities, explaining her observations of unusual energy readings in the night sky. At first, the police were skeptical. They had never dealt with anything beyond ordinary crime but her. Professionalism and the precision of her data slowly won their attention. She pointed out patterns and locations where the readings had been strongest, suggesting that if someone or something had taken the children, it might have left detectable traces. Though the adults were desperate for answers, Dr. Ellison's calm reasoning provided a glimmer of hope. She urged them to consider possibilities beyond normal explanations, even if it was difficult to imagine, as night fell over the town. The search parties reluctantly returned to their homes, exhausted and empty-handed. Streetlights flickered through the mist, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. Parents sat in their kitchens, staring at empty chairs, wondering where their children were and if they would ever see them again. Rumors continued to spread, now mixed with fear and imagination. Some swore they saw figures moving in the trees, while others claimed they heard voices calling their names from the darkness. The tension was palpable, and the town that had once felt safe was now gripped by fear and uncertainty. Throughout it all, Dr. Ellison stayed awake, monitoring her instruments and scanning the sky. The readings confirmed what she had suspected. Something very unusual had happened, something that could not be explained by ordinary events. She understood that the children's disappearance was just the beginning and that the answers would not come easily. The story of what had taken them, and why, was only starting to unfold. And she knew that the coming days would test not just the town, but her understanding of the world itself by the next morning. The entire town was talking about the missing children. Newspapers printed their faces, radios carried the story, and even news agencies from nearby cities sent reporters to cover the event. Yet, despite the attention, no clues had emerged, and no one had any real explanation. The fear of the unknown hung over the town like a storm cloud, and everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest resident, felt the weight of something they couldn't understand. The quiet, simple life they had known was gone, replaced by questions that had no answers, a mystery that was about to become far larger than anyone had imagined. High above the earth, far beyond the clouds and the reach of human eyes, a vast ship floated silently in space. It was unlike any human-made craft, smooth and metallic, shaped more like a living organism than a machine. Inside, lights shimmered in soft patterns, casting eerie glows on walls that seemed to breathe with energy. The ship was not empty. It held a small group of beings, far different from humans, who were observing Earth with careful attention. Among them was Rydell, a young alien scientist, whose curiosity often exceeded caution. Rydell had been studying Earth for months, fascinated by the diversity of life, the complexity of human behavior, and the strange, emotional bonds that humans formed with one another. From a distance, everything was orderly and predictable. But recently, Rydell had noticed anomalous small bursts of energy near the surface that didn't match natural phenomena. That night, driven by curiosity, Rydell activated an observational device close to one of these anomalies. He had never intended to interfere directly with humans. His job was to watch, learn, and report back to his superiors. Yet the device malfunctioned. What should have been a simple scan of a field in the rural town below became a powerful magnetic pull. The 3 children who had been playing innocently in that field suddenly vanished from their surroundings. Within seconds, they were inside the ship, startled and terrified, unable to comprehend what had happened. They had been pulled up gently, but the speed of the event, combined with the strange environment, left them screaming and crying. Rydell rushed to them, heart pounding, though in a way that humans might recognize as worry. He had never meant for this to happen. The children clung to one another, their small bodies trembling. Rydell tried to communicate in the limited ways he knew would calm them: soft sounds, slow movements, and gestures meant to show no harm. But the children did not understand, and their fear grew. For the first time, Rydell realized the gravity of the mistake. Observation was one thing. Abduction, even by accident, was something entirely different. The alien's mind raced, analyzing every possibility for returning the children safely. Yet the ship's systems had been disrupted during the pull, making precise control difficult. Meanwhile, the ship's commander Valar sensed the disruption immediately. A tall, imposing figure, Valar was strict, methodical, and loyal to the laws that governed their interactions with other civilizations. When he arrived at the observation deck, he found Rydell surrounded by the terrified children, trying to soothe them. His eyes widened with both anger and disbelief. He had trained the crew for emergencies, but this situation was unprecedented. Humans had never been intentionally brought aboard a ship. Interfering with them was forbidden, punishable by severe consequences. The commander's voice, though low and controlled at first, soon roared in frustration, echoing through the metal corridors, shaking the very walls. Rydell's explanations poured out rapidly, describing the malfunction, the magnetic pull, and the unintentional nature of the event. He pleaded for understanding, emphasizing that he had no desire to harm the humans. Vaylor's glare softened only slightly, but the anger and fear of violating intergalactic law remained. The children, still crying and frightened, had no idea of the complex politics and regulations at play. To them, this was a nightmare beyond imagination. They didn't know the ship, the beings, or why they were suddenly in a strange, glowing environment that seemed alive and alive with movement. The crew of the ship, small and highly trained, watched the scene quietly. Some members whispered to one another in their strange language, their voices a series of harmonic tones. They were unsure of what to do. Rydell had always been cautious, but curiosity had led to this unintended incident. Vaylor issued calm but firm commands, directing crew members to stabilize the ship, repair the magnetic pull, and ensure the children were safe. Every procedure was precise, measured, and calculated. But the emotional chaos of the children made the task infinitely more complex. Rydell remained at the center, trying to keep the children calm. He mimicked human behaviors as best as he could, drawing from recorded observations, gestures meant to show comfort, soft hums intended to soothe, even creating small illusions of light to distract their attention from fear. Slowly, though tentatively, the children began to respond. One of them, the oldest, reached out, touching Rydell's hand. It was a small act of trust, but it gave Rydell hope. He realized that these tiny beings, fragile and scared, were capable of understanding safety in ways he hadn't expected. The responsibility weighed heavily on him. Valer, pacing the room, finally issued a strict warning. You cannot keep them here. Any delay, any further interference, will be seen as a deliberate violation. His voice carried authority and finality. The weight of command was clear, yet beneath the stern exterior, he understood the dilemma. The children were not in danger from the crews they were protected, but the mere presence of humans aboard the ship created a crisis of rules, ethics, and interstellar law. Rydell nodded silently, acknowledging the severity, but he also knew he could not simply act recklessly. The safety of the children, above all else, had to be the priority. As the crew began to work on the ship's systems, repairing the malfunction and stabilizing the field that had captured the children, Rydell stayed close, monitoring their fear and trying to make the environment less frightening. He adjusted lights, reduced strange noises, and created a small area of warmth where the children could sit together. Slowly, the children's sobs lessened. Their faces, pale and anxious moments before, began to show tiny sparks of curiosity and relief. Rydell watched them carefully, making mental notes of their behaviors, emotions, and interactions. Despite the fear and confusion, Rydell felt a strange connection forming. These humans, so different from his kind, showed resilience and adaptability he had not anticipated. The children's trust, though fragile, taught him something unexpected, that even beings from vastly different worlds could share understanding, empathy, and care. This insight gave him courage and purpose, strengthening his resolve to protect them, even as Vaylor's presence reminded him of the rules and the consequences of failure. Hours passed in tense silence, interrupted only by the hum of the ship's repair systems and the soft cries of the children. Outside, Earth continued unaware, its night sky stretching infinitely, hiding the drama unfolding above. Rydell's mind raced with possibilities for returning the children safely, for avoiding detection, and for learning from this unplanned encounter. He realized that every action mattered, every gesture, every choice could change outcomes for both the children and the crew. The incident, though unplanned, had become a turning point, teaching lessons about responsibility, trust, and the fragile balance between curiosity and ethics. By the end of the night, the children were calmer. They huddled together, whispering to one another, occasionally looking at Rydell, as if he were both strange and familiar. The crew had stabilized the ship's systems. Vaylor, though still displeased, began to consider the possible ways to return the children without causing alarm. The stage was set for the next challenge: how to bring the humans back safely, unnoticed, while maintaining the secrecy and order required by interstellar law. Above all, Rydell realized that what had begun as a scientific observation had turned into something deeply personal. The lives of these small beings now depended on him, and failure was not an option. The atmosphere inside the ship was tense. Every corner seemed to hum with energy, every light casting long, moving shadows across the metallic walls. The three human children clung to one another, their small hands trembling and faces pale with fear. Despite Rydell's gentle attempts to comfort them, they could not fully understand where they were or why they had been taken from their homes. To them, this vast, glowing place was like stepping into a dream war, a nightmare they couldn't wake from. Valor. The ship's commander entered the observation deck with heavy steps, his presence commanding immediate attention. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the scene. The trembling children, Rydell trying to calm them, and the rest of the crew frozen in silent anticipation. He had trained his entire life to respond quickly to emergencies, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Humans aboard their ship was not just an accident, it was a serious violation of interstellar rules. The implications were enormous. You took human children. Are you out of your mind? Valor's voice thundered through the corridors, echoing like rolling thunder over calm water. The words were not merely anger, they carried disbelief, fear, and the weight of responsibility. The crew flinched, some turning pale, others stiffening with tension. Even Rydell, normally composed in his scientific approach, felt a chill run through him. He had not intended harm, and yet now he faced the full weight of the commander's outrage. Rydell's voice shook slightly as he began to explain. He spoke quickly, detailing the malfunction in the magnetic field device, the unintentional pull that brought the children aboard, and his immediate efforts to protect and comfort them. Valor listened, his eyes narrowing, cutting through the explanation with questions that were sharp and precise. How could such a malfunction occur? Why had Rydell not reported it immediately? Was there any risk that the children had been harmed? Each question carried consequences that reached far beyond the ship, beyond their world. Despite the storm of questions, the children remained at the center of the chaos. They were scared, confused, and desperate to return home. Their eyes darted from Rydell to Valor and back, silently pleading for reassurance. To them, the argument between aliens seemed incomprehensible, yet every raised voice, every sharp command heightened their fear. They clung to one another, whispering words only they could understand, their small bodies shaking as the metallic hum of the ship pressed against their senses. Rydell tried to maintain control, moving slowly toward the children. He crouched to their level, extending a hand in a gesture meant to calm, his body language soft and deliberate. I did not mean for this to happen, he said, his voice firm yet gentle. I am trying to keep you safe. You will not be harmed. The children hesitated, uncertain whether to trust him, but the sincerity in his tone, combined with his careful movements, made them pause their cries. The eldest, a boy of 10, tentatively reached out, touching Rydell's hand, a fragile act of faith that made the alien scientist's heart beat faster. Valor, pacing the room, shook his head, struggling to balance the immediate need for discipline with the reality of the situation. He understood the rules, and breaking them could have catastrophic consequences. Yet he also recognized that harming or frightening the children further would be unconscionable. He ordered the crew to focus on stabilizing the ship's systems, ensuring the children's safety, and repairing the malfunctioning magnetic pull. Every task was executed with precision, yet even as the technical problems were addressed, the emotional tension remained high. The crew began to whisper among themselves in their harmonic language, discussing possible solutions and contingencies. Some suggested returning the children immediately, but Valor knew it would be risky. Any sudden appearance or disappearance on Earth could trigger panic, military detection, or worse. The plan had to be careful, meticulous, and precise. Meanwhile, Rydell remained close to the children, using soft lights, calming sounds, and gentle gestures to keep them from panicking. Every small action counted. One wrong move could undo all the progress they had made in gaining the children's tentative trust. Hours passed in tense silence. The children slowly stopped crying, their eyes wide as they observed the alien environment. They noticed strange shapes moving in the walls, lights pulsing rhythmically, and even the subtle vibration of the floor beneath them. Their fear began to transform into curiosity, though it was cautious and wary. Rydell watched them closely, noting every reaction, every small sign of adaptation. He realized that despite the immense differences between his kind and theirs, there was a universal desire for safety and understanding, a connection that transcended worlds. Vaylor's patience wore thin at times, his temper flaring at minor mistakes by the crew. Yet beneath the anger, there was a careful consideration of every choice. Returning the children safely required more than technical skill. It required understanding human behavior, predicting reactions, and timing the operation perfectly. Valor issued precise orders directing crew members to recalibrate the magnetic pull, stabilize energy flows, and monitor the children's physiological responses. The ship's systems responded slowly but effectively, gradually returning the vessel to optimal stability. Rydell continued to guide the children through this strange environment, using every tool at his disposal. He projected soft images of forests and familiar landscapes. Mimicking the environments they had known on Earth, he spoke in gentle tones, repeating phrases designed to comfort. Occasionally, the children whispered questions, their voices trembling, asking who he was, why they were there, and if they would ever go home. Rydell answered as best as he could, though words alone could not convey the complex circumstances. Instead, he relied on empathy, observation, and gestures to bridge the gap between worlds. The tension began to shift as the children grew more comfortable with Rydell's presence. They still clung to one another, but their fear gradually gave way to cautious trust. Vaylor noticed this and realized that the young alien's approach, though unconventional, was effective. The children's emotional state was stabilizing, and the ship's systems were under control. The next step, returning them safely to Earth, would require the same careful planning and understanding of human psychology that Rydell had demonstrated. Despite the progress, the situation remained delicate. A single mistake could cause panic, injury, or detection by human authorities. Vaylor and Rydell worked silently together, their methods different but complementary. Rydell focused on the children, ensuring they felt safe and calm, while Vaylor coordinated the technical and logistical elements of the operation. The ship hummed with energy, a living organism of metal and light, responsive to their commands, yet unpredictable in its behavior. As the night continued, the children, though still uncertain, began to play quietly with one another, their small movements a sign of trust and adaptation. Rydell observed with relief, noting their laughter, whispers, and tentative smiles. Vaylor, watching from a distance, allowed himself a small sense of satisfaction. The immediate crisis had been managed, though the larger challenge, returning the children to Earth safely, still loomed ahead. Above all, both aliens understood the lesson of this encounter. Curiosity must be balanced with responsibility, and care must always guide action when lives are at stake. By the early hours of the morning, the children were calmer, their panic subsided, and their trust in Rydell growing. Valor gave final orders for the next phase, planning for a discreet return that would avoid detection and ensure their safety. The ship, now stable and ready, floated silently above the Earth, holding within it the delicate balance between two worlds. For Rydell, the experience had been transformative. What had begun as a simple observation had become a profound responsibility, teaching him lessons about empathy, trust, and the fragile connections that bind life across the universe. The night stretched over the small town, the streets empty and quiet but above. The alien ship hovered silently like a shadow against the stars. Inside, the atmosphere was tense yet focused. Rydell remained close to the three children, who had slowly begun to relax but still looked around nervously, unsure of what would happen next. Their small hands clung to one another, eyes wide at the glowing walls, the strange lights, and the soft hum of the ship's energy. Every sound, every movement, seemed alien and overwhelming. Yet Rydell's calm presence gave them a fragile sense of security. Vaylor, standing at the command deck, surveyed the ship's systems and the children below. He had spent hours analyzing every possible outcome for returning the children, safely to Earth. Any sudden action could trigger panic, alert humans, or even cause injury. His mind ran through countless simulations, weighing risk against responsibility. Finally, he made a decision. The children must be returned discreetly, using a method that would leave no trace and would allow them to step back into their lives as if nothing had happened. He instructed the crew to prepare a precise energy field, one that could gently lower the children to the ground without drawing attention from humans below. Rydell, understanding the commander's plan, focused on the children's emotions. Though the technology could solve the physical challenge, the emotional challenge remained. The children had been terrified, confused, and displaced. Their trust, though growing, was fragile. He projected gentle lights, soft images of forests and familiar landscapes, recreating what they had seen on Earth. He spoke in soothing tones, repeating phrases to comfort them and explaining in small gestures that they would soon be safe at home. The children, hesitant at first, began to imitate his calm breathing and soft gestures, slowly reducing the tension that had built up over the last night. Meanwhile, the ship's systems hummed and shifted, energy flowing in precise currents. Crew members worked in coordinated silence, adjusting the gravitational field, stabilizing magnetic poles, and monitoring every fluctuation. The slightest error could alert humans on the ground, but the team moved with exacting precision. Rydell watched every reaction of the children, noting their fear, their curiosity, and their emerging trust. He realized that the return would require careful timing, one wrong movement, one sudden light, and the delicate balance of calm could collapse. The children whispered among themselves, trying to understand their surroundings. The eldest asked questions about the glowing walls, the lights, and Rydell's strange appearance. Though he could not fully explain the complexity of his world, he spoke gently, offering reassurance and simple truths. They were safe, they would go home, and no harm would come to them. Slowly, their small hands stopped clutching each other so tightly. Their wide eyes began to blink in curiosity rather than fear, and their steps became more confident as they explored the safe space around them. Vaylor observed from above. His stern demeanor softened slightly as he watched Rydell interact with the children. Though he had been angry at first, he recognized the alien's empathy and patience. This connection, fragile yet real, was essential. The children's emotional state mattered as much as the technical precision of the operation. Vaylor issued final instructions. Once the energy field was fully calibrated, Rydell would guide the children into the landing chamber, and the crew would lower them gently to Earth. Ensuring minimal detection and complete safety, hours passed as the team worked tirelessly, testing, calibrating, and observing. The children, though still cautious, began to engage more, asking questions in whispers, pointing at glowing panels and touching soft surfaces. Rydell encouraged this curiosity, knowing it was a sign of growing trust. He projected soft images of earthly scenes, familiar places they had known, to reduce fear. The children smiled slightly, small gestures of relief that reminded Rydell why the task mattered so deeply. Outside the ship, Earth's night remained calm, unaware of the precise operation unfolding above. Rydell's mind stayed focused on the children, anticipating reactions, maintaining calm, and preparing them for what would come. He explained through gestures and projections that soon they would feel a gentle pull, and they should hold on to each other and remain calm. The children nodded hesitantly, trusting him enough to follow directions. It was a fragile trust, but it was enough. Vaylor, satisfied with the preparation, gave the command to initiate the energy field. Slowly, the landing chamber glowed softly, a gentle light that filled the space with warmth. Rydell guided the children into the chamber, speaking softly, projecting images of the familiar earthly environment below. The children clung to each other, their small bodies trembling, but they obeyed, trusting the alien who had shown care when fear had ruled. The energy field enveloped them, shimmering cocoon that would lower them safely, without alerting the humans below. As the field activated, the children felt a gentle lift, almost as if floating. Rydell and Vaylor monitored every moment, adjusting energy flows, stabilizing the pull, ensuring that the transition would be smooth. The children's fear returned momentarily as the movement began, but Rydell's voice, soft and steady, reassured them. "It's okay. You are safe. Soon, you will be home." Their small hands tightened briefly around each other, and then they relaxed as they felt the gentle descent. The chamber glided silently toward Earth. The night sky stretched around them, stars shimmering as if watching. The children peered out, seeing the familiar landscape below, forests, fields, and rooftops. Their homes were near, and a sense of relief began to replace fear. The energy field kept them safe, steady, and unnoticed. Every adjustment was critical, and Rydell's focus never wavered, ensuring their descent was as smooth as possible. Finally, the field lowered them gently to the predicted site, a small clearing near their town, illuminated only by faint moonlight. The children's feet touched the soft grass, and they looked up. Seeing the glowing lights of the chamber fade into nothingness, Rydell knelt beside them, offering one last projection of familiar earthly scenes, reassuring them that they were safe and that they could return home. Slowly, the children began to relax fully, their tension melting into relief and wonder. Valor watched from above, satisfied that the mission had succeeded. The crew stabilized the ship one last time, ensuring all systems returned to normal. Rydell observed the children, noting their relief, their smiles, and the small gestures of trust they had offered. It had been a delicate operation, balancing technical precision with empathy and understanding. They had returned the children safely, without detection, without harm, without chaos. As the ship prepared to leave the atmosphere, Rydell reflected on what had occurred. What had begun as a simple observation had evolved into a profound responsibility. The experience had taught lessons about empathy, patience, and the importance of understanding beings from another world. He had discovered that even in the smallest lives, trust and care could create connections that transcended species, worlds, and rules. The children, safe and calm, were a testament to that understanding. The quiet of the night returned to Earth as the children began to make their way home. Unaware of the cosmic journey they had just experienced, the small town would wake to find its children safe, with no evidence of what had happened. Only the lingering questions that would remain in the minds of a few observant adults. Above them, the alien ship disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying lessons learned, a sense of responsibility reinforced, and the knowledge that their encounter with humanity had changed them in ways they could never have predicted. The night had grown deeper, the world below silent, with only the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds breaking the calm. In the small town, families had settled into uneasy sleep, unaware of the extraordinary events that had just unfolded above them. The three children, guided gently by Rydell, moved quietly through a moonlit clearing, the soft glow of the ship's energy field fading behind them. They could feel the cool grass beneath their feet and smell the familiar scents of the forest. And slowly, a sense of safety returned. For the first time in hours, their fear began to dissolve, replaced by cautious relief and the tentative beginnings of wonder. Rydell kept close to them, careful not to frighten them again. He used soft gestures and soothing tones to reassure them that they were finally safe. "Stay together," he said gently, pointing toward the path that would take them back to their homes. He projected soft images of the houses they had come from, the familiar streets, and the comforting sights of their neighborhoods. Though the children could not fully understand the complexity of the alien's mind or the ship that had carried them, they felt the safety and warmth in his presence. Slowly they began to walk, small hands still holding each other, trusting him to guide them correctly. Above, the ship hovered silently, invisible to human eyes, the crew monitoring every movement. Valor, standing on the command deck, observed the operation closely. He had seen the care and patience Rydell had shown, and though he remained strict about the rules and consequences of interstellar law, he could not help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. The children were unharmed, calm, and beginning to navigate the world below with guidance. For the commander, this was more than a mission. It was a lesson in responsibility, empathy, and the unforeseen consequences of curiosity. The children whispered to one another, their voices low and trembling with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. They asked questions about the strange glowing walls, the lights, and the tall being guiding them. Rydell responded as best as he could, not with full explanations that might confuse them further, but with soft assurances and gestures that conveyed safety and care. The youngest child, who had clung to the others in terror, began to look around with quiet curiosity, noticing the trees, the stars above, and the soft breeze that carried scents familiar from home. This small awareness marked the beginning of their return to normalcy. Rydell felt a surge of relief. The path to their homes was quiet but tense. The children were careful, stepping lightly over roots and rocks, guided by the gentle presence of Rydell. He stayed slightly behind them, allowing them to move forward while keeping a protective watch. Every so often, he projected soft images of safe spaces and familiar landscapes. Reinforcing the sense that they were moving toward safety, the children began to feel the reassurance of home growing stronger with each step. Their fear replaced by cautious hope as they reached the edge of the forest. Rydell paused, ensuring that the environment was secure. The children looked up at him, eyes wide, sensing that this was the moment when their strange journey would end. He knelt down, speaking softly. "You are almost home. Stay together and remember you are safe." The children nodded, small smiles forming on their faces as they felt the warmth of his presence. Though they could not understand fully who he was, they recognized the care and protection he had shown throughout the ordeal. The ship, floating above, began to retract its energy field. The shimmering cocoon that had kept the children safe gradually disappearing into the darkness. Valor watched carefully, making final adjustments to ensure no trace remained. The crew moved with precision, their experience guiding every action. This was the final stage. The moment when the children would step back into their world without disruption, without fear, and without awareness of the extraordinary journey they had endured. The children finally reached the small streets of their town. They moved quietly, almost as if guided by instinct, following the familiar sights and sounds. Their homes were visible in the distance, windows glowing softly in the night. As they approached, a mixture of relief and disbelief washed over them. Everything looked normal, yet they knew that something extraordinary had happened. They held hands tightly, their trust in one another strengthened by the shared experience, and their hearts filled with gratitude for the being who had guided them. Tal remained with them until they reached the edge of their yards. He knelt, lowering himself to their level, projecting one final image of their homes to reassure them. "You are safe," he repeated softly. The children nodded, small smiles forming on their faces, and for the first time, they laughed lightly. The sound fragile but full of relief. They turned toward their houses, stepping forward together, ready to return to the warmth and safety of their families. Above, Valor signaled the crew to leave. The ship, silent and invisible, ascended into the night sky, disappearing among the stars. Inside, Rydell reflected on the events that had unfolded. What had begun as a scientific observation had become a profound journey of responsibility, empathy, and care. He had learned the weight of curiosity and the importance of understanding life that was fragile, small, and unfamiliar. The mission had tested him, but it had also changed him, teaching lessons about trust, patience, and the unexpected connections that can form across worlds. On Earth, the children returned home, their parents rushing to embrace them. Relief and joy filled the air, yet the children said little, unsure how to explain the extraordinary events they had witnessed. They hugged their parents tightly, whispering reassurances that everything was okay, while their minds carried memories of glowing walls, strange lights, and the gentle guidance of the being who had saved them. Though the town remained unaware of the cosmic events that had taken place above them, the children felt the lingering effects of an adventure that had changed them forever. Rydell, watching from above, knew the mission was complete. The children were safe, calm, and returned to the world they knew. The crew had executed the operation with precision, but it was the empathy and care shown to the children that had ensured success. He realized that understanding life was not only about observation, but also about connection, trust, and responsibility. These lessons, learned through the smallest and most fragile beings, would shape his future actions and guide his understanding of other worlds. Valor, standing beside Rydell, spoke quietly. Acknowledging the success of the operation, though strict in his adherence to rules, he recognized the value of compassion and understanding in guiding decisions. The mission had reinforced the delicate balance between duty and empathy, between law and care. For the crew, the children's safe return was not only a victory in terms of compliance, but a reminder that life, regardless of its origin, deserved respect, protection, and careful consideration. As the first light of dawn began to touch the town, the children were safely home, the streets quiet once again, and life appearing normal. Their journey, extraordinary and beyond human comprehension, had ended, leaving memories that would fade with time, yet remain deeply impactful in subtle ways. Above them, the alien ship vanished into the cosmos, carrying lessons, experiences, and a newfound respect for life and responsibility. Rydell and Valor returned to their observations, their minds changed by the encounter. Understanding that even small actions could have profound consequences, the children slept. Finally at peace, their minds drifting between dreams and memories of a night that had defied explanation. The town remained unaware, the world calm, yet the universe had shifted subtly. Connections had been formed, lessons had been learned. Life had been preserved in a way that neither humans nor aliens could forget. The mission had ended, but the story, the understanding, the trust, and the empathy would endure, quietly shaping both worlds in ways invisible yet profound.